Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're taking a first look at the brand new Shadow Legendary Pokemon in the world of Pokemon Go, Shadow Giratina Altered. This represents the first time that Giratina Altered has ever been eligible for the Great League, so you know I had to test it out to see how it can perform. Right off the bat, Shadow Giratina Altered is ranked number 1 on PvPoke for the Open Great League, so the question will be, after some practice battles with members of my Discord, do I feel that it lives up to the hype of that rank 1 rating? So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game number 1, we're off to a tough start, leading Giratina into Moltres. I save switch into Shadow Scizor, and it's at this moment I realized that I may have had some slight oversights when it comes to team building, but any team building oversight can be fixed with a Shadow Scizor boost. I boost, shield the fly, and in comes Quagsire. Quagsire going to be hit now with a Night Slash bait. I'm hoping that if I bait, I can make it to another Night Slash, but my Shadow Scizor just does not have the health needed. However, this does present a pretty interesting opportunity. Now, I can look to tank a Stone Edge, shield a Stone Edge, and farm all the way down with Giratina. This is going to give me a ton of energy. I can probably knock out the Moltres with a Dragon Claw if they switch it in, but no, they're going to switch in their final Pokemon, which is Tinkaton. Tinkaton, not the most fun Pokemon for the combination of Lapras and Shadow Giratina to see, but both Pokemon do have play here. Unfortunately, my Lapras is not Shadow. In this particular matchup, Shadow does get a Psywave Breakpoint into the Tinkaton, making it a much cleaner matchup. But because I'm not Shadow, this Aria will not be enough to knock out, and now my opponent will be able to land the Play Rough. I'm expecting they're switching Moltres, so I switch into the Giratina. There's the Simul switch, but I have the back-to-back Shadow Dragon Claws. Dragon Claw number 1 gets the shield, but there's more where that came from. Shadow Giratina Altered, even against a Fairy type and a Dark type, still taking KOs. In comes the Quagsire. Quagsire gets farmed down as well. Giratina survives the Fairy Wind, gets to the Dragon Claw, and is going to take all 3 KOs in game number 1 to secure the win. Great lead in game number 2, leading into Annihilate. There's a save switch into Diggersby, and I respond with Lapras. Now, you may have noticed, off of my IVs and combat power, I got one of the worst possible Giratina Altereds. The good news is that I do have several of the Giovanni radars saved from previous Shadow Legendaries that were just really bad. So I do plan on probably using at least 2, maybe even 3 radars to try and get as good of Shadow Giratina Altered as I possibly can. Here, unfortunately, I will not get the Sparkling Aria before they get the farm down. In the back is Shadow Drapion, and I respond with Shadow Scizor. I know that I don't get knocked out by a Crunch, so I will no shield. They end up baiting with the Aqua Tail. It's a charge stack priority tie here. I'm going to go for a slight undercharge on the Trailblaze, wanting to leave them on 1 HP, but my opponent is going to end up committing the shield. I'm very happy just to save 2 shields for my Giratina, because I know that as long as I shield up the Crunches, a Shadow Rage Fist is not going to be enough to knock me out. They just have no remaining fast move pressure into this Mon. Due to this interesting typing, the Ghost Dragon, the current best Dragon type in the Great League is Regidrago, which is a pure Dragon, which struggles quite a bit against Annihilate. So it's really interesting to see a new Dragon type that is able to absolutely manhandle Annihilate, tanking that Rage Fist. Opponent unable to farm down, building up to the Shadow Sneak, plus the Dragon Claw, and Shadow Giratina Altered, popping off, claiming another victim here as down goes Drapion. We move to game number 3, and what a lead, leading into Talonflame. Opponent save switches into Shadow Drapion, and again I will respond with the Shadow Scizor. They led with a Talonflame, so I'm never going to be investing resources into this Shadow Scizor. Here, I will fire off the Trailblaze on the CMP tie to their next move. Trailblaze does not knock out the 1 HP survive from the Drapion, means that my opponent has flipped switch advantage. This is really not great for me. I'm going to bring in the Lapras. I mean, the Talonflame's going to have nowhere to run, but this is tricky because now it's highly likely they have a decent check to Giratina in the back. Sparkling Aria is going to land. That's going to get Talonflame very, very low. Talonflame is going to full set the Brave Bird in the back. That's basically the worst case scenario. In comes Furret. Furret, a very strong Pokemon at beating both Lapras and Shadow Claw, Shadow Giratina Altered. I will be shielding up the Trailblaze, as that would basically remove the remainder of my health bar, and I just need to continue to get more Psywaves on this Pokemon. The lower that I can get the Furret, the closer it is to double Dragon Claw range. Furret is going to fire off the Swift. I'm unable to correctly predict when they throw and get the catch, and now this is going to be a tricky game. In comes the Giratina, and I will need this second Dragon Claw to take the win. Dragon Claw number 1 is going to be getting them very low, and my opponent will get the Trailblaze. This will set up a true 50-50. I predict they don't switch, throw the Dragon Claw, and they do switch into the Talonflame. Well played by my opponent. That's going to win them the game. If I had thrown the Shadow Claws, I could have farmed down the Talon and won, but I thought they would stay in and predict that I would predict they would switch. So unfortunately, I just didn't quite get that call right. We move to the next game. A very bad lead leading into Tinkaton, but my opponent is going to answer the Shadow Scizor save switch with a non-Shadow Quagsire. This is honestly very good for Scizor. I'm up quite a bit of energy, and I should be able to pressure both shields for my opponent. I want to get a shield advantage out of this mid game and potentially get a massive farm with the Shadow Giratina Altered. That's one thing I think Giratina does very well, is its ability to, after a mid game, tank a move, farm down, and just exit with absolute buckets full of energy. They will get to fire off the Stone Edge, but Giratina is very comfortable tanking this move. Opponent aggressively pivots into Tinkaton, trying to snipe down with a Bulldoze, but I end up catching that onto Lapras, and a bit of good luck goes my way, as the 50-50 coin flip for a Bulldoze debuff does not go through. I'm not expecting them to bait, so I will commit the shield, because I think having health on Lapras could be very important. I want as much residual energy on the Lapras as I possibly can, so I will farm up and fire off the Aria right before they get Play Rough number 2. This is obviously easily going to pick up the knockout, and I still have a Lapras with almost its entire health bar remaining. In the back is going to be a Drifblim, actually a Hex Drifblim at that, but this game is just over. Aria should put them in a range where I can snipe them down with the Shadow Sneak from Giratina Altered. This will be picking up the KO. Down goes Drifblim. All that's left is the Quagsire, and we just have energy on this Giratina. Giratina's always had very good pacing and bulk, and now for the first time, it's Great League eligible, and it is putting in some serious work. Negative lead in the next match leading into Regidrago. Obviously, with Giratina Altered, you can choose to run Dragon Breath, and I think Dragon Breath can be quite strong. Probably the Dragon Breath, Dragon Claw, Ancient Power moveset. I opted for Shadow Claw, just because that's generally what people are assuming will be better, but obviously it's going to be meta dependent. Here, Unova Stunfisk, not a good matchup for the Shadow Scizor whatsoever. My goal, if at all possible, is to try and get it into a range where I can Shadow Claw it down with the Giratina and not have to take a second move. That would be really good for me. I've gotten them very low, and now it's time to go for the reverse farm with the Giratina. Giratina hits the field looking for the full Shadow Claw farm down. They're going to fire off the Mud Bomb. Mud Bomb not going to do a ton of damage. Come on, Giratina. Giratina does not get the farm down. The Stunfisk, fractional HP remaining, makes one final move. I'm expecting their third is Scizor, so I farm up to a Dragon Claw plus Shadow Sneak, and then I need to switch out instantly, because they should switch in the Scizor. And if they do, then my Lapras can outpace and get to the Sparkling Aria. Sparkling Aria will force the final shield. It's all going to come down to this. Can I do enough Psywave damage to put it into Shadow Sneak range? I have the Shadow Sneak banked. They are one shy of the Night Slash. In comes the Giratina. Does this KO? Shadow Sneak into the Scizor. No, the Scizor hangs on for the second time this battle. A low HP survive, and that's going to be game over. We move to the next match, picking up a positive lead, Shadow Giratina into Golisopod. This is the Shadow Claw Golisopod, meaning they can fight back a lot better than if they had Fury Cutter, but even so, the 5-4 pacing on Dragon Claw means that Giratina will be emerging victorious in the zeros. The fact that they're staying, however, makes me think they're weak to Giratina, so instead of throwing the move, I'm just going to save the move and make a catch of an Aqua Jet onto Lapras. Lapras is going to be answered with a Talonflame, and considering my final Pokemon is Scizor, I am so happy to see Talonflame here. I'm going to be launching Sparkling Aria. We do see the shield from the Talonflame. Talonflame will undertap the move, and I'm more than happy to commit the shield. They go for the Flame Charge, and that does cause me a bit of concern. Will they be able to potentially incinerate down before I can get a third Aria? It's going to be very close. It's either going to be a 1 HP survive, or I'm getting farmed down here. I shield up the fly, my opponent waits a few turns. Oh, they try to catch on the Golisopod, but we actually simultaneously switch, I send in the Giratina, and they bring in Talonflame. Talonflame going to be hit with the Dragon Claw. That gets them low. We get the farm down of the Talonflame. In the back is going to be Furret, and this game will be a win, as Dragon Claw is going to get the Furret low, and I can just bring in Shadow Scizor and take the game. We move to the next match, and we see another water type with Shadow Claw. This time it's going to be Shadow Feraligatr. I'll throw one before their Ice Beam, but they actually CMP tie. On the off chance they have Crunch, I will commit the shield, and I'm very happy that I did, because they are actually running Crunch. I return Fire with the Dragon Claw. That's going to be no shielded. I can't farm down before they make their next move, but I will be firing off the Dragon Claw before their Hydro. Dragon Claw will land, down goes Feraligatr, and I do win switch, but the moment they send in Drapion, I'm pivoting out into the Shadow Scizor. Shadow Scizor, always going to be no shielding. There's going to be the Crunch from the Drapion. Scizor hangs on, but not by much. Whatever Bullet Punch damage I can get will be helpful. Trailblaze, shielded up, 2 Bullet Punches land, and that's going to get my opponent very low. In comes the Lapras. Lapras going to look for a Psywave down. It's going to be very close as to whether they can get their next Crunch. They're going to switch. It's going to be their own Scizor in the back, and they are immediately forced to burn the final shield on the Sparkling Aria. And now it's time. The Giratina that I saved from earlier getting to this Shadow Sneak. I need this to knock out. Shadow Sneak gets them low. They survive on 1 HP, but I snipe down with the Psywave. In comes Drapion. That gets Psywave down as well, and that's going to be a win. We move to the next match, and we've got the Battle of Shadows, Shadow Giratina into Shadow Marowak. Giratina has a very sizable pacing advantage here. I will get to connect with the Dragon Claw. That does very nice damage. Opponent undertaps, potentially worried about me doing 1 and a catch. This way they can guarantee that the move lands on its intended target. But now I get to fire off the Dragon Claw. This is probably just going to knock them out. They survive on 1 HP, safe switch into Lapras, and I will respond pretty slowly, but I do respond with the Shadow Scizor. Scizor is going to be putting up an early shield. I'm expecting my opponent to invest heavily in the Lapras, so I will farm up past the Trailblaze and go for the Night Slash bait. Night Slash gets no shielded, and I'm in trouble. Now I'm forced to go down 2 shields. I'm going to have all this energy on the Scizor, but being down 2 shields never feels particularly great. This is going to be a really tricky endgame. What do they have in the back? I'm staring at the top right corner. It's Talonflame. No, it's a Charizard. They try and catch. I switch, and this is going to be interesting. Charizard, unfortunately not what it once was. If this was Prime Charizard, the game would be over, but since this is nerfed Charizard with Ember as opposed to Prime Wing Attack, I think I can actually hang on, and I do. 1 HP on the Lapras. We survive. Sparkling Aria forces the shield, and now I will get to send in Scizor. Scizor will be firing off the Night Slash. Night Slash is just going to do way too much damage to the Charizard. At this point, this is farm down range. Charizard will go for the Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw is undercharged, but I can switch into the Giratina, farm down, and take the win. Hopping to the final match, we've got the Battle of the Shadow Giratinas. Looks like my opponent got a way better Shadow Giratina than I did. Theirs is, I think, 1490 something, whereas I'm in the 1450s. Dragon Claw does so much damage. It looks like I can farm down here, so I'm going to shield once and fully farm down. Giratina cannot get the farm down. They live on 1 HP. People just keep living on 1 HP in this video, man. Oh my goodness. I lose charge attack priority as well. And now I'm down a shield and switch. In comes Shadow Primeape. And this is probably just game over. Shadow Primeape will fire off the Rage Fist. They're going to switch into a Corviknight. Maybe the fact that they switched out of the boosted Primeape can give me an opportunity to win this game. Night Slash will connect. It's never doing a ton of damage, but it's all about chip damage and hopefully pressuring a shield. First shield of the match comes up from the Corviknight, and finally it's time for Lapras to shine. Lapras not going to be phased by whatever Corviknight throws here. It is going to be the Sky Attack. Lapras continuing the farm, but there's even more energy on the Corviknight. Corviknight gets another Sky Attack. That's going to get me low. In comes the Primeape, immediately answered with the Sparkling Aria. Sparkling Aria is going to be no shielded. In comes the Corviknight. It fails to farm down. Lapras survives and is able to make the Aria. Aria forces the shield. There's the switch to Scizor. Scizor makes the Night Slash, but this will not be enough damage to take the win. It's going to get my opponent deep into the red. They survive on 1 HP once again. It's going to be a race. Psywave versus Sand Attack. Psywave takes the win by 1 HP. And now some final thoughts on Shadow Giratina and its meta viability, specifically with regards to the Great League. Obviously, this is the first time Giratina Altered has been Great League eligible, so that's very exciting. What's not exciting is the fact that I got one of the worst possible Shadow Giratina spreads, but even with that, I felt like in these battles, Shadow Giratina was putting in a very nice amount of work. There are multiple movesets that you can try with Giratina. I wanted to test the Shadow Claw version first because Shadow Claw Shadow Giratina is a dragon type that actually beats the Dene. And that's not something that we really have in the meta right now, so it can potentially open the door to new styles of team comps, whereas currently you can't really pair a dragon with something that's weak to electric because you just get completely shredded by Dedenne. So I think it does potentially, just off of its typing and coverage, open the doors to some new kinds of team comps in the Open Great League, different team structures that aren't currently possible because we didn't have a dragon that could actually hold its own against the Dene. As for its actual meta performance, I do think it's very, very strong. Even though I have atrocious IVs and only get to 1456 combat power, it felt like in a lot of games, it was putting in so much work. I loved its ability to re-farm after mid-games, get a ton of energy, and then be very threatening. Shadow Dragonclaw hits very, very hard. Even Shadow Sneak, which is known to be a truly atrocious move, still felt like it was doing some pretty nice damage. So, all in all, I'm a really big fan of Shadow Giratina Altered. Is it the single best Pokemon in the Great League? I'm not convinced, but I'd say it's probably top 10 to top 20. I think it's a very usable Mon, should be like, I would say mid-tier meta, where it's an extremely playable Mon and you can use it to kind of carry its own weight and get wins in the Open Great League. I do at some point want to test out the Dragon Breath moveset on it as well, with Dragon Breath, Dragon Claw, and Ancient Power. Obviously, it would require a different team structure where you are stronger into Dedenne and other fairies in the back, but I do think that Dragon Breath has some pretty incredible wins as well. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is so appreciated. So thank you guys, it was very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.